Hi everyone, good morning. My name's Theo. I am running the demo today on analytics. Thank you all very much for taking the time to join. Just before I get started, a couple of just kind of things to go over. There's a question box in the top right hand corner. One of my colleagues will be kind of answering questions as we go. So if you do have any questions, please do fire them in the chat. I will also try and leave some time at the end for questions, but you know how these things are, slightly off the cuff, so we'll see how we're doing for time. Cool. In terms of agenda, so today's session is all about an introduction to FE Analytics. I wouldn't think about this necessarily as a training session per se, and more about kind of signposting what the tool can do. We do have a very wide team here who are able to kind of book you into bespoke training sessions, and I'll go through the training options at the end, but I wouldn't worry too much about kind of scribbling down notes on exactly what I click. It's more about kind of getting an understanding of what the tool can do. I will be going through comparisons as part of this on FE Analytics, which is obviously part of the appeal, and also kind of producing reports that you could show your clients. So that's kind of as an overview some of the bits I will be doing. If I have time, I will touch on our risk profiling part of the tool as well, which is a kind of a nice feature, and I'll talk a little bit about how analytics sits within our wider ecosystem, and also how it can link with other guys that you might be using. Cool. And then, yeah, as I said, at the end there, I'll go through some questions if we have time. So before I actually dive straight into the call, just a little bit about FE Fund Info if you kind of aren't too familiar with us before. Essentially, we serve the entire kind of advice or investment ecosystem. So as you can see from these stats, I don't need to read them out, but we do support a wide range of different kind of parts of the business. For a lot of you guys interested in analytics, that's probably part of these 4,200 financial advice and power planning firms. So we really are kind of trusted within the advice industry, but as you can see, also amongst fund managers, banks, platforms, and things like that too. Cool. And what we think we are in a position where we are kind of uniquely positioned to connect the two different parts of the kind of investment industry. So on one side, we have great relationships with all the fund managers and asset managements to collect that raw data. And then what we think is that we have the perfect opportunity to then distribute that using things like FE Analytics to kind of get that raw data and present it in a way that is easy for you guys to do your work. Cool. I will jump into the actual analytics product now. If I just come back to the home screen and I'll kind of get started on the actual demo. Yeah, I'm quite a simple person. I like to kind of break down analytics into three main kind of sections. So in the middle here, we have the input section. And essentially that is where you are going to find any funds you might want to research. You are going to find any kind of sectors, market indices that you might want to use as benchmarks and things like that. You'll have the option to filter based on the funds that you might want to research. And then ultimately you'll be able to construct and then do comparisons of things like portfolios. That's all in this kind of middle section. So that's kind of the first section. The right-hand side, which I'd kind of consider the second section, is essentially once you have got the input, that is where the outputs will be. So we've got a whole load of charts, tables, and reports in here. Again, I won't go through all of them. I'll just go through some of the kind of like the highlights. Definitely well worth having a look through this at your own time afterwards as well. And that's all the outputs. The third section, again, which is arguably the most important to kind of signpost because it is the one that people sometimes miss, is our additional tool menu. So there's a number of useful features in here that I will be going through today in the demo, ranging from kind of client tools where you can build in your client to the system. This will enable you to kind of save all research against the client so you can come back from a kind of compliance and consumer duty point of view. Also, our attribute to risks in there as well. A number of portfolio tools, such as a link to FE Cash Calc, which is one of our other parts of our kind of overall offering that I'll talk about briefly in a second, and also things like the MPS directory that I'll get on to talk about as well. Finally, for you guys who might be using analytics already, this platform analysis tool section you might have noticed is new. This was formerly Advisor Asset, but now comes under our wider framework. It is included with all analytics licenses. So again, I won't be able to go through that part of the tool in great detail today, but we do have other demos and things that I can go through in a bit of detail at the end as to how you can get a bit more knowledge about these sort of tools. But that's the additional tool menu. Cool. Before I kind of jump into actually showing you some of the functionality, I would like to kind of make the point that FE Analytics is kind of part of a slightly wider framework. So what we are basically doing for the kind of the advice industry, which is the kind of predominant users of analytics, is we're trying to enable advisors to essentially operate more efficiently, stay compliant, and enable their clients to make informed decisions, right? All whilst kind of mitigating that risk. So this is how we've kind of put together Nexus, which is a framework for delivering kind of financial planning through our best of breed technology. So that's analytics that we're focusing on today, but also cash calc and advisor asset. Which is the whole point of that, is to allow for kind of a more simple process, a streamlined end-to-end solution that would sit between your back office and your platforms, and the data would flow the right way through to avoid any rekeying. So if you're interested in that, again, I'll go through at the end how we can go into those sort of things, but for now, I'm just going to kind of focus on FE Analytics. Cool. So as a starting point, I mentioned this kind of input section. Very simply, we've got all the fund data. You want to be able to find it, right? So there's a couple of different ways that you would find funds on the system. You have got the kind of the manual search, and how I like to think about this is you've got a universe, which is kind of the outer layer. So that's the kind of the least specific way of researching. So let's say I wanted to look at unit trust and OICs, I would select that. So that's kind of the universe. You then select the management group. So again, starting to kind of tweak this list down a little bit. So let's say I was looking at 7IM investment funds, for instance. And then on this drop down, you would then see all funds that sit within that universe or that management group. You could simply select a fund, add it to the active list, and then very quickly, just clicking this button here, you could load up a fund fact sheet. And this is kind of, for me, this is the true value in analytics. All of this data is for this specific fund, but we get this for most funds that we have. And this is all to do with our relationship with fund managers. So we've got a nice overview summary here. We've got performance figures. Got some MiFID stats in here, dividend history, and again, you get the kind of idea, but I won't go through all of them. But that's literally a click of the button, you search for a fund, and you get all of this information, so a whole wealth of information for you to do some fund research on. Now, one kind of objection that we do get is people slightly struggle to find funds at a time because you might not necessarily know what universe or management group it's in. So this is what we've got this advanced instrument search for, which I think is probably a slightly better way of searching for funds. This essentially works as a kind of a Google search type feature, if you like. So you could just type in the name of a fund, you can put in an ISIN code, or you could put in a city code, which is what we kind of use as FE as an identifier. And this will do a whole of the system search. So you don't need to know the universe, don't need to know the management group. And I find a fund here, and you have the option to add it just as the instrument, or you might want to add a sector and benchmark as well if you are wanting to do some comparison. For now, I'm just going to go in and add that. So they're the kind of two main ways of searching for funds, and that's singular funds, as you may have noticed. We do have one kind of neat button here called the bulk code importer. And this is something that nearly everyone misses for the first time when they're going on the system. But essentially what this allows you to do is, instead of searching for a singular fund, you can copy and paste a list of basically as many funds as you like, up to 1,000. The system will whir away in the background and pull them all onto the screen for you. So picture if you've got a list on Excel, maybe that you're working off as a kind of fund panel that you're able to pick for building bespoke portfolios, or potentially you've got a new client coming on board and you've got their holdings, but it's going to be a nightmare to have to search for them one at a time. So this is where you would search for that sort of thing. It's going to just throw in 3 there just for kind of argument's sake, but this is how you would search for that. Fingers crossed there, real numbers. Cool, so there you go. And if a code's not found, so I must have put in a wrong digit in there, no problem, the others will still pull through, okay, and I can add that to the active list. That's a good point to kind of talk about this active list. So this is essentially what you are wanting to build up before you look to the right-hand side, which is the output side of the screen, to start reviewing all the different kind of charts and reports and things that you may want to do. But as you can see, very quickly, we've managed to put a few funds into the system. You can look at the fund fact sheets, so we're kind of ready to go for some more detailed research. That's the instruments tab. We've got sectors, and we've also got market indices, which is probably predominantly used for kind of whole of market research, or also to be used as benchmarks for some of these funds. They work in a kind of very similar way, so we don't need to go through it in too much detail. Essentially, you just select the universe and have a look at whatever sector you might want to look at, such as, UT Global is quite a common one that people like to look at. And you can then begin to look at the fact sheets of that sector, or you could use it in any of the kind of reporting that we are doing later. So really easy just to start navigating around different kind of whole of market research. Market indices, same way as sector, so I don't need to kind of go through that. Portfolios, perfect. So this is where you've got the individual funds and the holdings at the moment, but for a lot of kind of comparisons and client-facing reports, you're going to want to put this into a portfolio in order to kind of provide that to the client. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. I did allude to earlier the MPS directory, and this is an absolutely fantastic feature with analytics, as what we've got on here is, I think, something like 80 of the kind of biggest DFMs and MPSs across the country. So if you are using some of these guys, I'd have a look through to see if they are on the system. And let's say, for instance, I am wanting to use an AJ Bell portfolio. I would select on that and then simply just click the Activate Me button. This fires across a notification to AJ Bell, and then they can give access to their portfolios on the system. So instead of ever having to do any kind of portfolio construction, this will all pull through. But let's say you don't just use MPS, you like to kind of play around with portfolios yourself as an advisor, or if you're an investment person, maybe you do some of that portfolio construction yourself. Absolutely fine. You could do that on the system as well. So I'm just going to come into this new portfolios button here. This will come up with a pop-up, and this works exactly the same way as the fund search on the home screen. So you can go through the kind of check boxes as you go down to start constructing that portfolio. You could use the magnifying glass search, which again does a whole of the system search to type in a fund. Or if you've got the option already and you've got them in the active list, you can just import them from the active list. Take out that sector, and there are your 3 funds. Once you have kind of built up all of the holdings that are available within a portfolio, you can choose how you want to view and store them. So as a default, I've got percentage weighting, but if for whatever reason you've got it in value or units, potentially from a third-party provider or a new client coming on board, you can absolutely change that should you want to. For now, I'm going to leave it as weightings, press this Sigma button that is going to just equalize them as 33% each, and I'm going to save this portfolio as Chloe's pension for now. Perfect. So that's now saved as a portfolio. Very simply, I can add that to the active list, take away the funds, and you could start doing some reporting on the right-hand side. So let's say I'm going to do a performance line chart over 5 years, generate chart. As simple as that. For some of the more eagle-eyed of you, you may have noticed there are a number of other options here. I don't have time to go through all of those in detail, but a little bit later on in the kind of client journey, if you like, I will go through some of those to show you a couple of the other options. But as you can see, this is the performance line chart based on the last 5-year history, and you can see the return for this specific pension. But let's use Chloe's pension as an example. Let's say you're a advice firm. Chloe has come to you seeking some financial advice, and this is what she is currently invested in. You think that there is potentially more suitable portfolios out there for Chloe. So this is where potentially you're going to want to come into the client tools and client view area. And what I'm going to do now is move on to the attitude to risk part of the tool. Again, this is all kind of included as part of the standard FE Analytics license. And I'm going to jump onto this now. Cool, she's taken a second to load, but here we go. And what the investment planner is, it's essentially an end-to-end process going from an attitude to risk at the front end. We're then going to go on to, based on the risk output that we are getting from the E-value 1 to 5, which is what powers this, we are going to see what portfolios are appropriate for Chloe in this instance, based on that attitude to risk that we've got within the system. So I'm going to call this Chloe's plan. I'm going to select a tax wrapper, which doesn't necessarily matter, but I'll call this a personal pension, and I'm going to select her current portfolio. And we're going to move on. So at this point, we have got a few options how we want to conduct this attitude to risk questionnaire. Potentially, you've got the option to fill it in front of the client live. So you go through 13 questions, and the client will give you their answer. You fill it in the system. You could do it live. You could email it to the client, in which case an email will be automatically populated, sent across to their email, and they could fill it out in their own time. You could do it the old-fashioned way with paper and pen, although at FE we are all about kind of connectivity and tech, so we probably would dissuade you from doing that because we think it's a duplication of work. Or you could skip the questionnaire and manually set a risk level if you don't want to use these questions and you've already got their attitude to risk. Maybe you've done it with another provider or something like that. But for now, I'll just very quickly start the questionnaire and just show you these 13 questions. They're all kind of fairly standard tests. For now, I'm just going to come in and say somewhere in between. So these are just 13 questions, just understanding a little bit more about the client using a standard attitude to risk, because I'm sure you're all kind of familiar with. So I'll just come through this in between. And because I'm clicking the medium option, I would expect to come out as a medium risk investor, right? An interesting part about this eValue 1 to 5 questionnaire is the different terms. So we have three options here. You've got a short term, a medium term, and a long term investor. The reasoning behind this is we don't think, or eValue doesn't think, that if you are a risky investor over the short term, the asset allocation should be the same as if you are a risky investor over the long term, right? They're very different things. The equity content of things are going to be different depending on that. So in this instance, I'm going to say Chloe is a medium term investor, and I'm going to continue. You get instant results and a typical asset allocation based on the eValue recommendations. Of course, this is just a guideline. So if you disagree with this, completely fair. Our own FE investments team does stick to the eValue asset allocation to a degree, but obviously it makes its own tactical tweaks as well. So even our team, very aligned to them, are more than capable of doing their own kind of tweaks. At each stage of this journey along the investment planner, we also get some nice documentation, which is useful from a kind of compliance and consumer duty point of view. All of this is kind of available after the fact as well, so you can go back and review it, but it's there for each step of the journey as well. And I'll come on to capacity for loss. And as I'm sure you're all more than aware now, the FCA do like you having conversations about capacity for loss and knowledge and experience as well. We do have that built into the system. The idea of this is you as the advisors potentially are having conversations with your clients, and you're going through a couple of these questions. And this is just a way of documenting that. So not a tick box exercise by any means, but definitely a way of recording this and ensuring that you are compliant and all your consumer duty obligations are fulfilled. These are a couple of kind of presets we have. More than welcome to add in your own. And again, all of this sort of stuff you can kind of follow up with later. But for now, I'm just going to come through and say no to most of these. If you say yes, got to fill in some notes. But I'll come on to knowledge experience, exactly the same as capacity for loss. Yes, no answers. Just documenting that you had a conversation, a holistic conversation with the client. Get the outcome again, potentially following the capacity for loss and knowledge and experience. You might have changed the risk result. Maybe we had Chloe down as a short-term investor in previously, but having had a conversation about capacity for loss and knowledge and experience, you've decided that maybe a medium investment would be more suitable. But for now, I'm just going to agree with this banding and come on to the true power of this tool, which for me is this suitable portfolios. Before I do the suitable portfolios though, I would like to point out, some of you may have seen the export attitude to risk to cash calc. Again, our systems talk to each other very well. A lot of people might do this part of the kind of journey, if you like, in cash calc, because we have a really good client portal there that has a kind of fact find, document exchange and things like that. So a lot of people choose to do that attitude to risk in the front end. You could then push that to analytics. It will come back at this point where you would want to do the suitable portfolios part, which is where analytics really comes into its own for this part of the attitude to risk. So what the system is now doing, it's loading in the background all of the model portfolios and bespoke portfolios that I might have built on the system that have a risk score that is within the same banding as Chloe's results that she did on this. So the indicative FE risk score of 65 to 75. And it's going to pull through all of the portfolios I've got on the system. Hopefully you guys won't have quite as many as this that fall within that risk category. So a really useful way of kind of ensuring that the client's risk matches up with the portfolio that you may invest them in. If I scroll down to the bottom, we will see here that the pension that I just threw together using 3 random funds is actually fairly close in this case. That was a bit of a strike of luck, but potentially let's say that it is quite a long way off and we might want to move the client's portfolio. So what you would do then, you would select one of these. So I'm just going to choose one of our FEI level 3 mediums, and I'm going to do a compare selected portfolios. So what this is doing is very much a side-by-side A versus B comparison of the two portfolios. And we're going to be looking at a number of different kind of metrics. So you've got a summary where you will see the risk comparison, you will see the portfolio expense, and you will see a performance, and also, volatility there as well. I always think of that as kind of the golden three. So if you do have a situation where the portfolio you're proposing is cheaper, high performing, less volatility, you know you're onto a winner. And there's a couple of other kind of research metrics that you could have a look through here as well, including ESG analysis. ESG analytics is an interesting one. We have full SDR framework built into the system. So as soon as the fund managers are ready to go on that, we are too. You can see that they are starting to get filled out. We also have other third-party ESG methodology holders such as ISS on the system as well. They each have their own unique methodology and a way of kind of evaluating ESG scoring. So if that's an area that your clients are starting to kind of put a bit more attention to, definitely have a look at that as well and ask any questions as we go if you have any. Of course, at this point, you do also have the option to jump back into the main part of analytics should you need to do some more detailed research. But for now, let's just say that we have done some research and we do think that this portfolio is appropriate to move the client to. To come back to the suitable portfolios again, it's reloading up that entire list. This probably won't take quite as long for you guys, but I do have quite a few portfolios on the system. We're going to scroll down, choose the portfolio, and confirm that selection. Complete the plan, and again, this is the sort of plan that you might want to be doing on a on a kind of a yearly basis, almost just to demonstrate that you have had this sort of conversation with a client. Most of the time, it probably wouldn't be moving their investments around, obviously, but that is in here as well. We'll come through to report center, and this is kind of what you would then be presenting to your client after you have done all of this research. I'll whack in a few of the options in here. Won't throw in the fun fact sheets, just throw in all this and I'll generate the report. And at this point, just while this report's loading, I'm going to quickly jump back to analytics. And this may well be a good time where you might want to start looking at some of the other tools like Advisor Asset. Let's say you have found the portfolio, you think that this is the most appropriate portfolio. That's the time to jump to Advisor Asset to do some charge comparison potentially, or even some platform due diligence. So what this would allow you to do is essentially to see which platform would be the most appropriate to invest on based on that portfolio. So really useful part of the tool. It's a multi-wrapper kind of switching tool. So you've also got kind of pension switch, ISA switch, drawdown to drawdown switch, things like that. And you can analyze kind of multiple wrapper types just in one analysis. So it's a really good part of the system. We have demo Wednesdays going through this, and we also have a number of guides and training. So I'd thoroughly recommend kind of checking that out if you haven't already. Let's come back to this report. So in the background, this lovely kind of report has been loading. All reports within analytics will be branded with your own logo, your own name, and just a very quick, this is a kind of a breakdown of what we've got. So we've got all of the answers from the attitude to risk and the result. We've got a typical asset allocation, again, similar to that kind of possibility of losses document, but your actual portfolio may well be different to this due to kind of tactical tweaks, absolutely fine. A detailed record of everything that we went through. Portfolio journey, possibility of losses and things like that, and then a nice comparison report. So this is where it's a really nice way of showing your client easily kind of digestible information. You can just see the history of the two portfolios, holdings comparison, bit of ESG analysis, another performance, asset breakdowns, comparison breakdowns. And I won't go through all the different elements, but it's a really detailed switching report. You could file it away for kind of compliance purposes, or you could go through this with a client to kind of demonstrate this is why we think you should move portfolios. Cool. So I'm going to jump back to analytics now. We had Chloe's pension. We're now going to be starting to use this new portfolio that we're choosing to invest in, which I think is one of these FE Investments ones. And we can go through another kind of few things on the tool. So sticking with the performance line chart for a second, let's just say that you've gone through all of this. Chloe kind of is understanding that we think it's a good idea to move the portfolio, but suddenly gets cold feet and says, look at the market, the S&P is crashing. all I'm hearing about is that it's a bad time to invest and I'd rather keep my money as cash because it is safer. There's a really nice way of showing on the performance line chart why that is not really the case. And I'll be going through a few of these options now. So I alluded to at the start a few of these other things that you might want to change. In this instance, the first thing I'm going to change is the base. From the performance line chart we loaded before, you'd have seen it was a percentage increase. I want to make it a little bit more kind of in the client's language. So I'm going to use lump sum and say that if you had £10,000 5 years ago, let's say 10 years, what would have happened? And I'm going to also change this to relative to change the benchmark of this portfolio. I am going to choose the consumer price index and I'm going to make that the benchmark. And I'm also going to throw in another couple of proxies to say consumer CPI is the benchmark. We've got an actively invested portfolio. And I also want to throw in a couple of other metrics. One, a 0% interest, which is just cash under the mattress, cash in a bank account, that sort of thing. And also, let's call it a 3% savings account, which might be the sort of rate maybe you would have got over 10 years if you just put that money in a bank with decent-ish interest rates. And I'm now going to generate this chart. And again, hopefully this is opening up other possibilities in your mind as the sorts of charts and reports you would be able to show your clients. The tool is very flexible. It allows you to do a lot of kind of research. So as you can see from this, really powerful visual for me. It's one that I show all my mates who are hesitant about investing. But you can see line D here is the true value of that £10,000 if you had left it as cash. So as you can see, in 10 years eroded by over 2.5 grand. Pretty scary stuff. Even that 3% bank account, you're still slightly worse off in real terms, not even beating inflation. And here we've got actively investing in the market. So even if markets are bad, that old adage, time in the market, all that sort of stuff, very important. So a really good kind of compelling visual as to why a client should be investing in the tool or investing in a portfolio in the market. Cool, so that's on the performance line chart. There are a number of other charts that are useful here, kind of looking at different things. Similarly, in the tables, you could do all sorts of similar things from kind of ratio tables, holding comparison, all of that sort of thing. I won't go through all of them in detail because they all fundamentally work in the same way as the performance line chart. You would simply select the table you like, potentially go through some of these, and just generate a table to do some kind of comparisons. What I would like to signpost is the reports tab. And the reports tab is what I think is a more useful way of really getting value out of the tool, because essentially the charts and tables are presets that we as FE have basically said we think these are useful. Reports gives you the option to kind of completely bespoke any reporting you would want to do on the tool. And to kind of illustrate some of the powers of this, I'm going to go to the fund filters side and I'm going to build a new fund filter. Essentially what we are doing here is we are taking that entire universe of unit trust and OEICs, which as you can see is 3,000 funds, and we're going to start whittling down into a more digestible list. And then we are going to start running some reports on that. So a really, really powerful way of kind of doing some in-house research. And the report I show could also be applied to kind of things like a portfolio panel as well. So a really powerful way of doing research. Can't kind of stress that enough. Cool, so I'm going to come in here and say I want cumulative performance of at least 5% in the last year. Let's see, there we go, taken out almost half of the funds. And essentially what we're doing is we're now excluding funds that do not fit this set criteria. We have a quick find here. I would thoroughly recommend using it. What factors are important to you when researching is what I would think about. So let's say maybe we wanted to look at the FE risk score, which is still coming up. Let's do volatility. So we'll type in volatility. It will come down to the drop down. We'll say volatility, 5% as well. I'm just going to kind of keep bringing this up. Crown rating is quite a nice one as well. So this is to do with in their sector, how well they're performing. We're going to say it needs to be at least 4 crowns and above. Whack that in, and you get the idea. We're starting to whittle down that list. Let me just quickly change this to, let's do 5 to hopefully get the list even smaller. And this is a snapshot as of today. So let's say this is a sort of report you might want to run on a quarterly basis to kind of see which funds are still in this criteria. You can come back at the end of a quarter and start doing this fund research. So we're going to save this. And we're going to remember that there's 138 funds that are now part of this. I'll show you the results now. So you can just see all these funds and see all the scoring. So really useful way of kind of doing some much more kind of whole of market research. And as you can see, that didn't take long to load. That filter is a template, so you can keep coming back to it again and again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a custom table, as I alluded to earlier. This is how you could start building those bespoke reports, and we're going to action it on the fund filter. So on those 138, I think it was funds, what criteria do you actually want to look at those funds? And I'm going to build a template here right now. And this custom table is something that I would definitely get familiar with. Yeah, really powerful. Basically takes each different parts of the tool, from fund fact sheet data to performance figures, things like that, and it pulls it into one place to create one table that you could just use on a monthly basis just to evaluate anything that you might want to look at. So again, let's say we want to look at 1, 3, and 5 year performance. You can throw that in. In this case, we will look at the FE risk score. We want to look at that. We want to throw in some 1, 3, and 5 year volatility as well. And again, always using the quick find, just have a play around. Most parts of the tool that you might want to look at would be available through this. So yeah, definitely have a look. I'm just going to look at these for now. I'm also going to throw in I'll leave it as that for now actually. And we'll save that. Cool. And at the moment, this table is going to be running on that fund filter, so those 138 funds. But another popular use case is a portfolio panel, which is where things like the FE risk score, which I've included in this to kind of illustrate that that's available, and things like portfolio expense you could add in, OCF, TER, all that sort of stuff. So you could start building really bespoke reporting that you may want to look at to kind of bespoke funds. 138 funds here, and as you can see, it does take a bit of time to load because there's all that kind of detail going into it. But while it is loading, I'll kind of draw some attention to some of these other options on the right-hand side that I'll be going into in a sec. The ranking method is a super useful part of this custom table. So what this does is essentially, obviously you could rank it against the actual table. So in which case we would have these 138 funds ranked, but you also have the option to see how they are performing against their sector and also versus their benchmarks. If you want to make sure that you've got the top 10% of funds, you could start looking at all of that sort of thing as well. Taking a bit of time to load here. So while this is loading, I will come in and load a portfolio panel example as well, just in the background. So let's just throw in a few of these different portfolios. So you might have a list of 10 NPS portfolios that you want to review on a regular basis. Come into here, action on the active list, and I will use the same criteria as before, and I'll generate this chart as well. That should load a little bit faster. So again, just looking at those criteria that I'd set, which was 1, 3, 5 year performance, 1, 3, 5 year volatility, and also the FE risk score. And this is the sort of table that you would get kind of produced with. And this is very much a starting point. There's a lot more detailed research that you can do from this point. So I'd encourage you to have a play around yourself. You might have noticed a fund comparison up here. So this is a really nice way of just seeing an apples v apples comparison between up to 5 different funds in one go, really detailed. As I said, you have the option to highlight percentiles and things, and you can group within sector and all of that sort of stuff. So you could really start doing some detailed analysis if you've got a list of, say, 100, 200 funds on here as well. Got some more detailed charting options in here as well to report. So this is what we call the interactive performance chart, a great way of doing a little bit more kind of granular research than on that standard portfolio performance line chart that we did at the start. So a really good way of looking at not just cumulative performance, but discrete performance, calendar performance, and it's well worth having a kind of a play around on there. Hopefully that gives kind of a bit of a flavour of the kind of research capabilities of the tool. Yeah, this one's struggling to load. I might be a little bit too optimistic with those 138 funds, but definitely the sort of thing that you might want to schedule to load in the background, which is another thing that the tool can do. So there's a lot of kind of flexibility about that sort of thing. So you could schedule reports to run every Monday morning. So when you get into the office, it's there ready to go and all that sort of thing. Cool. So what we've just gone through there is a kind of a brief introduction in terms of those input, output, additional tool menu parts of the tool. We've built the client into the system as well in order to conduct that attitude to risk and then a kind of report at the end to potentially present this information. We've done the performance line chart there, which is a great way of showing a kind of why to invest is quite a nice use case, and that kind of cash versus inflation, if you like, chart. And then also kind of signpost this much more detailed reporting that is available to you under the reports tab. Of course, there are an absolute plethora of other things that we could go through, kind of charts and tables and some of the other tools here. But I think as a starting point, that is probably what I would kind of have a play around on. So again, just to kind of recap some of the important stuff there. To find funds, we're going to use this instrument search, type in the name of a fund and build up that active list. And the active list is really what you want to get familiar with. In terms of efficiencies, you're going to want to play around on this part of the tool quite a lot just to make sure that you're comfortable with navigating it, and then start playing around on the right-hand side reporting to build the charts that kind of suit you. I did mention at the start that we have kind of quite a wide team here and that this is not necessarily a training session, more of a show and tell. On the tool, so I mentioned Advisor Asset, we do have training that you can book onto on a weekly basis as well. So this is going to go part that brand new functionality, only went live last week. So I do thoroughly recommend that you guys kind of get ahead of the curve and start having a look at that. We've got a number of other training and guide resources as well in here as well. So these are kind of old fashioned PDFs that you might want to go to. We also have a kind of CPD more official training academy, which I would thoroughly recommend for those users who are potentially wanting to become experts on the tool. So I think it's 5 different courses, each going through a different part of the tool. If some of this isn't relevant for you, don't need to attend that session. So let's say, for instance, you are purely interested in the portfolio design, don't bother go to the fund research. And at the end there is an option to get a kind of a certification as well, say you're FE certified, which is becoming quite an exciting thing within the industry. And also all of this is kind of available through CPD. We have slightly less formal training kind of run-throughs as well, which is things like this analytics tips using a program called Genially. And essentially this is kind of a nice workflow to kind of go through different parts of the tool, which personally I prefer than the kind of the training academy, because I think the videos are a little bit more digestible. You could work through them at your own pace, and you could find the ones that are of particular interest to you. So let's say that that filter building that we just did, fund filter, you're interested in kind of doing that a bit more. You can click on that. It will give you a YouTube video and also a PDF guide. All those YouTube videos are available here on the FE Analytics YouTube page. And I'd like to think that pretty much anything that you would want to ask, I would come here and come to these training things as well. So there's a lot of resource. Just if I come back to this as well. I think I'd now like to open up to any questions. Let me just see if any have been coming through while I was demoing. Cool. They look like they have all been answered, which is fantastic. And now, yeah, just like to open up the floor to any other questions. So if anyone does have any questions, please put them in the chat now, and I'd be happy to go through them. Cool. And just while you guys are doing that, I would say that, as I keep mentioning, we do have a very wide team here. One of our team will be in touch after this just to arrange a more bespoke one-to-one session. So really evaluating which parts of the tool might be of particular interest to you and how it might fit into kind of your wider client journey or your wider tech stack and things like that. So we do have really powerful integrations with a lot of back office providers, people like IntelliFlow or Iris Xplan. And also to our other products like FE Cash Calc and Advisor Asset. And that leads on to the second part of this, which is our Demo Day Wednesday series. So if you have found today useful and you're interested in learning about Advisor Asset or Cash Calc, please do sign up. And also please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I will always be sharing kind of the up-to-date information. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that you have all of the information that you may want on our tools, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Cool. It doesn't look like any other questions are coming through. Appreciate I slightly whizzed through that. But if there aren't any more questions, I'll give you all kind of 4 minutes or so back in your diary. One of our team will be in touch. And yeah, I hope you find that useful and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.